My parents made me drop out of school to work and support the family. Years later, when they needed money for my brother's tuition, I told them to ask him for a job, since he was still living in their basement. I grew up in a small, cramped house where dreams were treated like luxuries we couldn't afford. My name's Ethan, and from as far back as I can remember, I wanted one simple thing: to finish school, go to college, and build a life that didn't revolve around counting every single coin before buying groceries. But in my family, ambition was a problem. Not because they didn't want me to succeed, but because they saw success as something that only one person could afford to chase. And in their eyes, that person wasn't me. My parents always said I was the reliable one, the one they could count on. It sounded like a compliment back then, but I later realized it was a label, one that quietly chained me to a life I didn't choose. When I was 17, just a few months away from finishing high school, my dad lost his job at the factory. My mom was already working part-time at a diner, and money had always been tight. One night, we sat at the kitchen table, the tension so thick it felt like another person sitting between us. My dad rubbed his temples and sighed. "Ethan, we can't keep up with the bills. The electricity, the mortgage, your brother's tuition. It's too much." I didn't understand at first. "I can get a weekend job. I can help." He shook his head. "It's not enough. We need more." Then my mom looked up, her eyes already wet. "Honey, maybe you can take a break from school. Just for a year. Help out until we get back on our feet." The words hit me like a slap. Drop out? I'm so close to graduating. I can't just. "Ethan," my dad interrupted sharply. "Family comes first. We all have to make sacrifices." I remember looking across the table at my little brother, Ryan. He was 15, bright, loud, full of life. He was the one they always bragged about. "Ryan's going places," they'd say. "He's going to be the one who makes this family proud." He didn't look up, just kept eating like none of this concerned him. I felt the sting of tears but blinked them away. Why me? Why can't he get a part-time job too? My dad slammed his fist on the table. "Because he needs to focus on school. You're older. You can handle it." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, every dream I'd ever had dissolving into the dark. All I could think was, how did helping my family mean giving up my future? The next week, I dropped out. My guidance counselor tried to convince me otherwise, but I couldn't explain the guilt sitting in my chest. I told her it was temporary, that I'd come back when things got better. But temporary turned into months, then years. My first job was at a mechanic shop. Grease under my nails, long hours, minimum wage, but it kept the lights on at home. I handed my paycheck to my mom every Friday without fail. She'd smile, kiss my cheek, and say, "You're saving this family, Ethan." But I wasn't saving anything. I was losing myself. By the time Ryan graduated high school, with new clothes, a shiny laptop, and my parents cheering from the front row, I was too exhausted to even attend the ceremony. That night, when he came home holding his diploma, I congratulated him. He barely looked up from his phone. "Thanks," he said. "You'll get your chance too, someday." But I already knew I wouldn't. I used to think love meant sacrifice. That being the responsible one was something to be proud of. But as I dragged myself to another shift at the auto shop the next morning, covered in oil and sweat, I started realizing the truth. In my family, my sacrifice had become their convenience. And deep down, I knew someday they'd regret it. The years that followed blurred together into one long, exhausting shift. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years, and I was still at the same mechanic shop, still clocking in before sunrise and stumbling home after dark, hands sore, body aching, and dreams buried somewhere under layers of motor oil and fatigue. I was 23, but I felt 40. Meanwhile, my brother Ryan was thriving. He had graduated high school with honors, not because he was smarter than me, but because I'd worked my fingers to the bone to make sure he could focus on school. He went to college, got a fancy apartment, and started posting photos online with captions like, "Chasing my dreams. Hard work pays off." Hard work? He wouldn't know hard work if it punched him in the face. And yet, every time I opened social media, there he was, smiling, free, living the life I'd wanted. Back at home, nothing changed. My parents still called me whenever bills were due or when something broke. "Ethan, the car's making a weird noise again." "Ethan, can you send a few hundred? We're short on rent." "Ethan, your brother needs textbooks for next semester." That last one always made my stomach turn. One night, after wiring them money, I stared at my nearly empty bank account and asked myself the question I'd been avoiding for years. When does my life start? I had become the family's safety net, invisible until someone fell. The breaking point came a year later. It was Ryan's graduation day. My parents had saved every last penny to fly out and see him get his degree. I couldn't afford to go, partly because I was still paying off their electric bill from last month. When they came back, they wouldn't stop talking about him. "Oh, Ethan, you should have seen your brother up there. We're so proud. He's going to be somebody." They didn't even notice the exhaustion in my face, the grease on my clothes, or the fact that my lunch that day had been instant noodles and black coffee. I smiled weakly and said, "Yeah, he's lucky." My dad frowned. "Luck has nothing to do with it. Ryan worked hard. He deserves this." Something inside me cracked a little. Deserves it? I bit my tongue, but later that night, As I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, I whispered to myself, so do I. A few months later, Ryan came back home after graduation. I thought maybe he'd matured. Maybe he'd thank me, or at least show some respect. But no, he lounged on the couch all day, scrolling on his phone, talking about finding himself before applying for jobs. One night, I came home from work to find him in my old spot at the dinner table, eating the last of the food I'd bought. Mom was smiling, Dad was laughing, and for a moment, it looked like I had vanished completely from their world. That was the night I decided I was done being the family's crutch. I started saving, quietly. Every paycheck, I set aside a little. I stopped sending money unless it was an emergency, and even then, I made excuses. I began taking online courses at night, learning basic IT skills and software troubleshooting. It wasn't easy. I'd work 10 hours a day, come home exhausted, and still stay up until 2 a.m. watching tutorials. But for the first time in my life, I was doing something for me. It took 2 years, but eventually, I landed an entry-level tech job at a small company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid more than the mechanic shop ever did, and more importantly, it was mine. When I told my parents I was moving out, they acted like I'd betrayed them. You're abandoning your family, my mom cried. Who's going to help with the bills? My dad demanded. I took a deep breath and said, I've been helping since I was 17. It's time I helped myself for once. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The day I moved into my own apartment, I stood in the empty living room, holding a cup of cheap coffee and looking out the window. No one depended on me. No one needed me to fix their problems. And as strange as it sounds, that silence, that empty space, was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. But life has a funny way of circling back. Because a few years later, when everything was finally going right for me, my parents called again. This time, it wasn't about their bills. It was about my brother. By the time I hit 30, my life looked nothing like it had before. The boy who once fixed cars in a dusty garage had become a senior IT consultant at a mid-sized tech firm. I had a sleek office, a small but steady team, and enough savings to finally breathe without checking my account balance twice. I even bought my own place. Nothing crazy, just a modest condo downtown with big windows and quiet neighbors. I decorated it with things I actually liked. No greasy tools. No piles of overdue bills. Just peace. I'd built it all from scratch, my way, and I swore I'd never let anyone take that from me again. Then, one Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. For a moment, I just stared at her name. It had been almost a year since we'd last spoken, the longest we'd ever gone without contact. I debated ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to answer. Hey, Mom, I said cautiously. Her voice was shaky. Ethan, we need to talk. Those 5 words instantly brought back old memories. The guilt trips, the manipulation, the way we need to talk, always meant we need your money. What happened? I asked, already bracing myself. She sighed. It's your brother. And the house. Long story short, Ryan hadn't exactly turned out to be the success story they'd hoped for. After graduation, he bounced between jobs, marketing, sales, a few startups that never took off. He'd been living back home for 2 years, unemployed and figuring things out. Meanwhile, my parents had refinanced their house to pay for one of his failed business ventures. Now, the payments had caught up to them, and they were about to lose the place. We just need a little help, Mom said, her tone pleading. Just until things get better. I sat there, silent. My mind raced back to all those nights I'd sent them money, skipping meals to keep the lights on, only to be treated like the invisible one. And now, after everything I'd been through, they wanted me to fix their mistakes again? Ethan, Mom continued softly. You've always been the responsible one. We know you can afford it now. That sentence, we know you can afford it now, hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't love. It wasn't apology. It was entitlement. I took a deep breath and asked, Where's Ryan? He's around, she said. He's trying to find a job, but nobody's hiring. Is that what he told you? I said. Or what you want to believe? There was a pause on the line. Then I said something that even surprised me. You should ask him for help. Her voice cracked. Ethan, that's not fair. Neither was making a 17-year-old work full-time while his brother got to live his dream, I said quietly. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. Part of me wanted to cave, to help them like I always had. But another part of me, the part that had suffered in silence for years, whispered that it was time to stop. That week, I got another call, this time from Ryan himself. Bro, he said casually, like nothing had ever happened. Mom said you're being difficult. The house thing, it's not that serious. You could just cover it, you know? You've got money now. I almost laughed. You really think I owe you that? He snorted. You're being dramatic. We're family. Family. I repeated. Funny how that word only comes up when you need something. There was a long silence. Then he said, Whatever, man. You'll regret it when they lose the house. I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. A few weeks later, I got a promotion, and soon after that, I started my own small consulting business. It took off faster than I ever imagined. Within 2 years, I had a team, a company name, and contracts that paid more than my entire first year's salary combined. I bought a car, not the flashy kind Ryan used to dream about, but one that was mine, paid in full. And every time I drove past the old neighborhood, I felt a strange mix of sadness and pride. Sadness for the boy I used to be. Pride for the man I'd become despite it all. But I didn't hear from my parents again for a long time. Not until one fateful afternoon, when they showed up at my company's office, unannounced, with desperation written all over their faces. Their house was gone. Ryan was still jobless. And suddenly, the son they'd once thrown aside was the only one who could save them. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those crisp, quiet days when everything felt like it was finally in place. I was sitting in my office, my own office, overlooking the city skyline, sipping coffee, and reviewing a new client proposal. My assistant knocked gently on the door. Mr. Cole, she said cautiously. There are two people here asking to see you. They say they're your parents. I froze mid-sip. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My parents? Here? I hadn't seen them in years. Not since that call about the house. Send them in, I said finally, setting the mug down. When they walked in, I barely recognized them. My dad's hair had gone completely gray, his posture stooped with the weight of years and regrets. Mom looked older too, her eyes tired, her clothes worn. There was no trace of the proud, demanding woman who used to scold me for not doing enough. They stood there awkwardly, taking in my office, the awards on the wall, the framed certificates, the small shelf of family photos, none of which included them. Mom's eyes glistened. You've done well for yourself, she said softly. I nodded. Yeah, I worked hard for it. Dad cleared his throat. Son, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't important. They explained everything. After losing the house, they'd moved into a small apartment, but even that was becoming too expensive. Ryan had tried to start another business, but it failed, leaving them in debt. Now, they were out of options. We just need a little help getting back on our feet, Dad said. You're successful now. Surely you can spare something. There it was again, that tone. Not a plea for forgiveness. Not acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just expectation. I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and let the silence hang heavy. Then I asked, where's Ryan? Mom hesitated. He's at home. He's been struggling. He feels awful about everything that happened. I almost laughed. Does he? Or does he just feel awful because I'm the one who made it out? The air in the room thickened. My father shifted uncomfortably. Ethan, we were just trying to do what was best for the family back then, he said. We needed you. I stared at him, my voice calm but cold. You didn't need me, Dad. You used me. You made me give up school, give up my future, so Ryan could have his. Mom's lips trembled. We didn't have a choice. Yes, you did. I snapped. You just didn't want to say no to him. You made me the responsible one, the adult in the house before I was even old enough to vote. You said it was temporary, but it wasn't, was it? Their silence said everything. After a moment, Mom started crying. Ethan, please. We're your parents. We made mistakes, but we love you. We need your help. We'll lose everything. I stood up and walked around my desk, looking out the window. The same city that had once felt like an unreachable dream now stretched out before me, a reminder of how far I'd come on my own. When I finally turned back to them, I said quietly, you know what's funny? When I needed help, all I got was guilt. When you needed money, I was there. But when I wanted a chance to live my life, you kicked me out. Dad's voice broke. We didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe not, I said, but you did. And I carried that hurt for years while you celebrated Ryan's every success, every step that I paid for. I walked back to my desk, picked up my pen, and said the words I'd been waiting to say for years. If you need financial advice, I can refer you to someone. But if you're here expecting me to fix everything again, no. Mom gasped. You're really turning your back on us. I looked her dead in the eyes. No, I'm just done being your safety net. They didn't say another word. My assistant quietly opened the door for them, and they left, slower, smaller than when they'd come in. When the door closed behind them, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt peaceful, because for the first time in my life, I had chosen me. That evening, I went home to my quiet apartment, poured myself a drink, and stood on the balcony watching the city lights flicker below. I thought about 17-year-old me, exhausted, angry, broken, and I wished I could tell him, you made it. You didn't need their approval to build a life worth living. But fate wasn't quite done yet. 2 weeks later, I got another unexpected call. This time, it wasn't from my parents. It was from Ryan. He wanted to catch up, and something in his voice told me this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about survival. It had been 2 weeks since my parents walked out of my office. The quiet that followed was almost eerie, but peaceful. Then one morning, while I was reviewing a new business contract, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. For some reason, I answered. Hey, bro, came the voice on the other end. Ryan. I hadn't heard his voice in years, but it was unmistakable, the same lazy, confident tone that used to get him out of every mess. Except this time, it sounded thinner. Ryan, I said coolly. Didn't think I'd be hearing from you. He gave a nervous chuckle. Yeah, well, life's been rough lately. Thought maybe we could catch up. Maybe grab lunch or something. I could almost hear the words he really wanted to say hiding underneath that fake casualness. He needed something. Still, curiosity got the better of me. Sure, I said. Let's meet. We met at a small cafe downtown, neutral ground. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. His once well-groomed hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, his confidence dimmed. This wasn't the golden boy my parents had worshipped. This was a man life had finally humbled. He gave me a strained smile and sat down. "You look good, man. Successful." I nodded. "Yeah, things worked out." He fidgeted with the napkin. "Yeah, I've been, struggling. The job market's rough, and I can't seem to catch a break. I've been helping mom and dad where I can. But, money's tight." There it was, the build-up before the ask. Then came the real reason for the meeting. "So look, I heard your company's hiring. Maybe you could, put in a good word for me." I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence hang just long enough to make him squirm. "Ryan," I said finally, "what makes you think I'd hire you?" He blinked, confused. "Because we're brothers?" I smiled faintly. "You mean the same brother who got to live his dream while I worked 2 jobs to feed the family? The one who never once said thank you?" He looked down. "That was years ago, man. We were kids." "No," I said quietly. "I was a kid. You were the one who got to be one." He sat there, speechless. And for the first time in our entire lives, I watched realization dawn on his face. The understanding of just how much I'd carried so he could stand tall. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You once told me you were destined for greatness, remember? That some people just had it easier because they were meant to? Well, I guess you were half right. Some people do end up with easier lives, because someone else is breaking their back to keep them afloat." He swallowed hard. "So that's it. You're just gonna let me sink?" I shrugged. "I didn't throw you in the water, Ryan. I just stopped swimming for you." He didn't say another word after that. He just stared at me, realization hitting him like a wave, that the brother he'd looked down on had become everything he wasn't. Independent, respected, successful. We finished our coffees in silence. When we stood to leave, he muttered a quiet, "I'm sorry." And for once, I believed he meant it. Months passed after that day. My parents never called again. Ryan tried to rebuild his life, slowly this time, without shortcuts. I didn't help him financially, but I didn't hate him either. Because the truth is, holding on to anger would have kept me chained to the past. The same past I'd fought so hard to escape. One evening, I stood outside my company's new office building, a glass tower with my name on the door. I looked at the city lights reflecting off the windows, the soft hum of success buzzing in the air. And I thought about 17-year-old me, tired and invisible, told he'd never be more than a tool for someone else's comfort. If only they could see me now. And then, almost as if the universe was listening, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Ryan, cleaner, sharper, and holding a small envelope. He handed it to me. "An application," he said simply. "For the entry-level IT support role. I don't want a favor. I just want a chance." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in our lives, I saw humility instead of arrogance. After a moment, I nodded. "Then earn it." He smiled faintly. "I will." As he walked away, I couldn't help but feel a strange warmth in my chest. Maybe this was what closure really looked like. Not revenge, not payback, but peace. Because in the end, I didn't need them to acknowledge what they'd done wrong. My life was proof enough that I'd been right to choose myself. And when I looked up at my company logo, shining proudly against the night sky, I whispered to myself, "Never again will I let anyone decide what I'm worth."